Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Here are the stories we're following today.
Karen, we begin with an update on the fighting in the Middle East. Israel has carried out its first airstrike on central Beirut in the nearly year-long conflict, coming days after Israel's military killed the longtime leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah. David Wood is a senior Lebanon analyst at the International Crisis Group.
There's been an increasing sense in Lebanon that this is becoming not just a war between Israel and Hezbollah, but a war between Israel and Lebanon. And there was an attack at a place called the Kola intersection, which is not in the southern suburbs of Beirut, which are considered largely a stronghold, shall we say, of Hezbollah and its supporters. So quite seriously, Lebanese from all different communities and political persuasions use this intersection frequently in normal times. So it's another really scary escalation in the conflict and makes people feel that there's increasingly nowhere left that's safe in Lebanon during this war.
And that was David Wood, senior Lebanon analyst at the International Crisis Group. In just over a week, intensified Israeli strikes in Lebanon have killed 7 high-ranking commanders and officials from Hezbollah.
Well, Nathan, on the campaign trail, both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump have been putting a focus on immigration. The vice president held a rally in Las Vegas last night.
Earlier this year, we had a chance to pass the toughest bipartisan border security bill in decades. And Donald Trump tanked the bill because he thought that bill, if passed, would have hurt him and he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem.
Kamala Harris also told the Vegas crowd she's all in for another debate with Donald Trump. Now, the former president says the border is a problem because of Harris.
What she's done is a total disqualifier. She should be disqualified. She should resign the vice presidency and go home to California. She is she's really destroyed it.
At a rally in Pennsylvania, Donald Trump also slammed the vice president for holding fundraisers in California over the weekend. Harris raised about $55 million at events in Los Angeles and San Francisco. Trump attended his own Silicon Valley fundraiser earlier this month.
And Karen, the vice presidential candidates get the spotlight tomorrow night when Republican J.D. Vance and Democrat Tim Walz meet for their debate hosted by CBS News in New York. Republican Congressman Tom Emmer of Minnesota has been helping Vance prepare to face his home state's governor.
I've known Tim, probably since he was first elected almost 20 years ago, and I worked with him directly for 4 years. I spent the last month just going back all of his old stuff to get his phrases down, his mannerisms, that sort of thing. My job was to be able to play Tim Walz so J.D. Vance knows what he's going to see.
Minnesota Congressman Tom Emmer was a guest on ABC's This Week, heard Sundays on Bloomberg Radio. For full coverage of the CBS News vice presidential debate, catch the simulcast on a special edition of Bloomberg's Balance of Power. That starts tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio and television.
Well, Nathan, key industry and government officials are urging U.S. dock workers and their employers to avoid a strike at East and Gulf Coast ports. The U.S. Maritime Alliance, a group representing ocean carriers and port terminal operators, and the International Longshoremen's Association have no talks planned before their contract expires at the end of today. President Joe Biden said he would not intervene in any dock workers' strike. He told reporters resolving the dispute is a matter for collective bargaining.
Turning to markets this morning, Karen, it is a huge rally to start the week in Asia. Stocks in China surged 8.5%. 3 of China's largest cities relaxed rules for home buyers, while the central bank also moved to lower mortgage rates.
Well, Nathan, today marks the final trading session of the third quarter, with equities surviving what's traditionally their toughest stretch of the year. We get details from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
Investors expect the rally to keep running in October despite a contentious presidential election campaign, shifting Federal Reserve policy, and fears of a pending recession. The S&P 500 index had its third straight winning week and is up 5.1% in the third quarter, putting it on track for its best start to a year since 1997, according to data compiled by Bloomberg. It has also pushed the benchmark's market cap above $50 trillion for the first time, and it all happened in September, which historically is the stock market's worst month in New York. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Radio.
Okay, Charlie, thank you. In Europe, it's a tough day for Stellantis. Those shares are down more than 12%. The Jeep maker has slashed its profit margin forecast for the year, and Stellantis plans plans to dial back production and spend more on promotional incentives in a slowing and more competitive automotive market.
And Nathan Aston Martin shares are down more than 22%. The luxury car maker is lowering its guidance for the year. It blames supply chain disruption and weak demand in China.
Karen, let's turn our attention now to space.
Freedom, SpaceX on the big loop, soft capture confirmed.
Crew 9 now aboard the International Space Station and joining Expedition 72.
SpaceX launched a 2-person crew to the International Space Station, the start of a mission to bring home 2 NASA astronauts who've been stuck in orbit after flying to the space station on Boeing's Starliner spacecraft. NASA astronaut Nick Hague and Russian cosmonaut Alexander Gorbanov entered the ISS late yesterday, and Hague thanked the team for getting them to the station safely.
Coming through the hatch and seeing all the smiles, and as much as I've laughed and cried in the last 10 minutes, I know it's going to be an amazing expedition. So I'm really looking forward to getting to work up here.
And that was NASA's Nick Hague. The pair had 2 empty seats next to them that astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams are going to fill when the spacecraft returns to Earth next year. The Crew 9 flight was meant to have a 4-person crew, but NASA removed 2 crew members to make room for the Starliner duo after technical failures with Boeing's spacecraft.
It is time now for a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. And for that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. North Carolina officials are pledging to get more water and other supplies to storm-damaged areas after Hurricane Helene left a trail of destruction across the U.S. Southeast. Authorities have struggled to get supplies to isolated areas, including the city of Asheville. Massive rains brought by Helene left many people stranded or homeless around the region. The death toll from the storm topped 90 people across several states. Many local officials, like Buncombe County Manager Avril Pinder, say that they're doing what they can to get help where it's needed in their community.
We need food and we need water. My staff has been making every request possible to the state for support, and we've been working with every single organization that has reached out.
Millions remain without lights from Florida to Indiana. Duke Energy spokesman Bill Norton says restoring power will be a multi-day project.
We're going to have entire substations that were underwater, need to be repaired, in some cases fully rebuilt.
Meanwhile, forecasters say a new tropical depression in the eastern Atlantic Ocean could become a hurricane by midweek. New York City Mayor Eric Adams spent the weekend visiting churches as the ongoing criminal case against him continues. Adams received a standing ovation at a Bronx church Sunday. However, calls for Adams to resign grow louder. On Friday, he surrendered to authorities and was slapped with a 5-count indictment. He stands accused of bribery, wire fraud, and accepting illegal campaign donations. However, Adams told ABC 7 Sunday he is not resigning.
While the attorneys handle the due process, I'm going to handle the management of the city.
The mayor's inner circle is imploding. His police commissioner, health commissioner, and schools chancellor have all stepped down or will soon. He was a Rhodes Scholar who became a superstar songwriter, singer, and actor. Chris Christopherson has died. Christopherson has a gritty realism to country music with compositions like Sunday Morning Come Down and Me and Bobby McGee, and this one, Help Me Make It Through the Night.
Take the ribbon from your hair.
As an actor, he was a leading man opposite Barbra Streisand in A Star is Born. A family spokeswoman says Christopherson died at his home in Hawaii at age 88. Global news 24 hours a day, and whenever you want it, with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Karen.
All right, Michael Barr, thank you. Time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update, brought to you by Tri-State Audi. And for that, we bring in John Stashower. John, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Aaron Rodgers approaching his 41st birthday. Worked his way back from a torn Achilles. Yesterday may have been a day where he was thinking retirement would have been a good option. Had to play in the rain, got sacked 5 times, hit 14 times. Rodgers couldn't get his Jets into the end zone. They had 13 penalties. They lost to Denver 10-9. The game ended with a missed 50-yard field goal by Greg Zuerlein. The Jets coach was Robert Saleh.
Sloppy. A lot of pre-snap penalties. they're already a good defense, and we made it easier for them with just a lack of execution. We had opportunities, first and goal from the 1. We've got to be able to put it in. Didn't. Had the ball twice with a chance to win. Didn't.
Jets now 2-2. They play next Sunday in London against Minnesota, who's 4-0, led by the ex-Jet Sam Darnold. Vikings had a 4-touchdown lead at Green Bay, ended up winning by 2 points. Buffalo last night was looking to go to 4-0, lost in Baltimore 35-10. The Patriots lost 30-13 at San Francisco. The Commanders, impressive, winning at Arizona 42-14. The Mets are in Atlanta for this afternoon's regular season-ending doubleheader. Both teams in the same situation, win one game today, and they're in the playoffs. If a team loses both, Arizona gets in. Mets won 5-0 in Milwaukee behind David Peterson. The Yankees finished with a 6-4 win over Pittsburgh. The Yanks are the AL's 1 seed. They'll start the postseason Saturday in the Bronx against either Baltimore or Kansas City. There hasn't been a Triple Crown winner in the National League since 1937. Shohei Ohtani came close. Ohtani ended up with 54 home runs, 59 stolen bases. In Brooklyn, the Liberty won Game 1 of their playoff series with Las Vegas. Breanna Stewart scored 34 points. In Montreal, the U.S. won the President's Cup golf for the 10th time in a row. John Stashauer, Bloomberg Sports, Karen and Nathan.
Coast to coast on Bloomberg Radio, nationwide on Sirius XM, and around the world on Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager. Investors are getting ready to close out the third quarter with tensions in the Middle East and along East and Gulf Coast ports top of mind. So what should be top of mind for you as we get set for the final quarter of 2024? Let's bring in Lori Calvasina for a look at this market, head of U.S. equity strategy at RBC Capital Markets, with us in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studios this morning. Lori, good morning. We look at futures giving back just a little bit this morning, but despite all the risks I just pointed out, S&P 500 is poised to end this quarter up 5%. But does headline risk cloud the outlook?
All right, well, thanks for having me, as always, Nathan. Look, I think if you look at, indicators like the VIX, like the TDEX, they are starting to creep up a little bit. So we don't think the market is being too complacent about the risks that are growing. But one of the things I find myself saying to investors recently is we can't live in the tails when we're thinking about our equity market outlook going forward. And I think that's a lesson we've all had to really learn in recent years, that the market does look at these things. They do, price them in their own ways, often with positioning trades underneath the surface. But if you put those sort of tail risks aside, the reasonably, sort of thinking about a good economy next year, inflation continuing to moderate, earnings growth continuing to be strong, that's supportive of all PE multiples and additional, gains in the equity market next year. So I think it's right for markets to sort of be watching these things out of the side of its eyes, but not overly reacting in the moment.
So what should investors be focusing on most as we head into this fourth quarter?
So I think earnings season is going to be pivotal, and it's interesting. We've already started to get some questions there. I really think that investors are going to be looking for companies to get a sense of where corporate confidence levels are and the feedback loop into the labor market. I think that we're still, unfortunately, just debating whether or not the economy is going to sort of tip into something more difficult. There's still a lot of concerns about the labor market. I think that the Fed cuts, it's really important to have those, underway. But at the same time, people are continuing to talk about the long and variable lag. So I think that companies are really going to be in focus in what they're saying about their own confidence levels, what they're doing on CapEx, and what they're doing in regards to the labor market. I think that's going to be crucial in coming weeks.
In terms of what you're hearing from corporates so far, what do they want to see from the Fed? Are they looking for slow and steady? Are they looking for the Fed to deliver something bigger?
I don't know that I'm getting a clear sense of, companies wanting big cuts. I think it was important just to get the cuts started and to understand what the direction of travel is. I think there is a sense that it's going to take some time to really see the cuts work their way into the system. So obviously, I think maybe bigger cuts, maybe you reduce the amount of time that's needed. But it's funny because I have actually, sort of been poking, with certain individuals and companies on this question, what is really, what are you looking for, right? Whether it's regarding interest rates, whether it's regarding the election. I think it was just the need to get the cuts underway, and I think it's the passage of the election itself that people want to see.
Yeah, I do want to ask you about the election as well. There's so much uncertainty surrounding that, such a tight race. Does it make it difficult, not just for you as an equity strategist, but for these companies to game out how things could go depending on who wins the race? Got about a minute left.
Yes and no. Look, I think that companies, there's a sense of they want to know what the lay of the land is and they want to know what they're dealing with. But the reality is that if you look at how equity markets perform under either a Republican sweep or a Democratic president with a split Congress, those are the two best historical scenarios for the stock market in the past. So, I'm not getting a clear sense of, policy A, policy B. I do think tax policy is in focus, but I really do, again, just think it's wanting to know what we're dealing with.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak, your morning podcast on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed by 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 92.9 in Boston, and nationwide on Sirius XM Channel 121.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, now with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto interfaces.
And don't forget to subscribe to Bloomberg News Now. It's the latest news whenever you want it, in 5 minutes or less. Search Bloomberg News Now on your favorite podcast platform to stay informed all day long. I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.